Hello, it's Austin Meyer, the X-Plane Guy, and today I'm going to take 844 X-Ray here for a short flight, and then when I land, I'm going to extract data from the black box of the airplane and replay the flight that I just flew in X-Plane itself. We'll compare X-Plane to reality. Then, after we've taken a little look at that, I will show you how I extracted the black box data from the avionics in this airplane so that you can do the same thing in your airplane. After you land, you'll be able to grab the data out of your aircraft, load it into X-Plane 12, and replay your flight. All right, let's see how it goes. Owens traffic, experimental 844 X-ray, taking pre-1, Owens. Owens traffic, experimental 844 X-ray, taking off 31, Owens. Okay, that was pretty cool, wasn't it? So if I had that flight to do over again, I would have worn a leather jacket just so I could match my little mini-me in the simulated airplane there. But okay, so what we just saw is I flew a real flight, grabbed the data, replayed it in X-Plane. Now I want to set it up so that you can do the exact same thing easily and quickly, because it's really fun and really useful, and this can be useful for accident investigation as well if you want to replay an accident flight. So the first thing that I did is I grabbed this little file right here out of the avionics of my airplane. I got a Garmin G900X, and this little data file is loaded up with data on each flight. Hopefully you have the same thing in your avionics. But here's what's kind of cool. Even if you don't have a Garmin that stores comma-separated files on this kind of little data card here, if you can get a CSV file any way you can imagine, you're good to go. All you need is columns of data, preferably separated by commas. And once you have columns of data separated by commas where you know what each column of data represents, you will be able to quickly make an FDR version 4 file for X-Plane, which is what I used for this replay you just saw. All right, so here's the data that I got from my Garmin, but you can get any way you want. It's a CSV file, and as you might expect, well, here it is. What we've got here is a nice little headlines, and this is what Garmin printed out for me. They printed nice little things at the top like baro, inch, you know, or baro altitude, baro inches, degrees outside air temperature. You'll notice a lot of the things are spaced out empty. Well, that's just because data hasn't loaded yet. If you just give the avionics time to boot and get their temperature and have me get the engine in started and stuff, you'll see that most all the data is filled in. It looks like the only thing it didn't really fill in is the cylinder head temperature, probably because there's no cylinders in my airplane. So what we've got here is the CSV, or comma separated file, from Garmin, and you get your comma separated file any way you want. Out of the Avidyne, maybe you generate it yourself from Flight Test. If you can come up with a CSV file, you can replay it in X-Plane. So once you've got your CSV, your columns of data, what I did is I made a new text file called FDR example version 4.fdr. FDR stands for Flight Data Recorder File. So now that I've made this text file, the Flight Data Recorder version 4 file format, all I'm going to do is copy and paste the columns of data from the CSV into the FDR. Isn't that cool and isn't that easy? So when I open the FDR file here, there's some headliner type stuff that I'll explain in a moment, but then it just gets into columns of data. Look familiar? These are the columns of data you just saw in Garmin's raw file that I just copied and pasted right into my FDR file. Now, this FDR file, I'm going to post this on my website and give a link to it in the YouTube video description. So you can download this file for yourself and use it as a starting point for your own FDR files. And then I'll also put it in the output folder of X-Plane. So when you download X-Plane, you can see this file in the output folder as a sample as well to get you going. Because we always love to have sample files to get you started. That's like, that always sounds like the first 90% of the job for me. The first 90% can be the hardest part sometimes. So anyway, this is the FDR file. Link to it in the description. Now let's look at what this file is so you understand every line in it. First, you start out with an A or an I. That's for Apple or IBM. That's just so the scanner knows what kind of character turns to deal with. Then the number 4. This is a file format version 4 that we're looking at. And then some comments. COMM comma. It's just a comment. You put anything after that you want. Then we go to the ACFT. That is the path to the aircraft on your disk in X-Plane. For me, of course, it's aircraft, Laminar Research, Lancer Evolution, 844 X-ray aircraft. Whatever plane you want to use to replay the flight visually, just choose that here. After that, you enter the tail number, the date, the barometric pressure in inches of mercury, D-ISA, that is the temperature difference, delta from international standard atmosphere. So I just said it's standard atmosphere temperature, and then the wind. Now, what's kind of interesting is, even though we enter all this stuff now, you may well be able to find data refs for wind and temperature and pressure. And so these data values here, they can be changed as the flight progresses and as new data comes in. But this is just a starting point that we're going to use until further notice in case we can't find data refs for these things. So once we've entered this, we've pretty much gotten enough to get the party started. So the next thing we got is some comments, and now what we see is DREFs, data refs. So remember how I said you've got these columns of data, and I said, well, you can use any columns you want, any data you want. Well, how do you tell X-Plane what's a temperature column, what's a pressure column, what's an airspeed column? Well, of course, X-Plane has to know that, and the way we do that is with these data refs. What we see here are DREFs that are highlighted. These are the data refs we're about to fill in order. And so whatever order you see these data refs listed in, that's the order we're going to give X-Plane data in the columns that are going to follow in just a moment. So let's take a brief look at this. Notice we're doing Sim Cockpit 2. We like Cockpit 2 because that's like the next generation cockpit variables. What we've got is barometer setting, inches HG pilot, airspeed knots pilot. That's indicated, by the way. Airspeed knots pilot is indicated. And Ben probably should have indicated that with his data ref name. But nevertheless, it is indicated. True airspeed pilot, ground speed knots, altitude feet, VVI. It goes on and on. Then you get down to engine, fuel flow, fuel pressure, temperature. We set Sim Cockpit 2 whenever possible, engine. And so what we've done here is loaded up all of the data refs, and it's normally in Sim/Cockpit 2 that we are going to read in these columns. And these data refs, to anybody that's looked at the Garmin G900 CSV file before, these data refs are the things that Garmin provides to us that are handy to put in our flight data recorder replay. Now, after these data refs, which list the columns, and again, I want to reiterate here, if you are running a flight test program and you have flight control deflections, fine. Put in a column for flight control deflections and jam in the data ref here. And if the 20th column is flight control deflections, well, then the 20th data ref in this list should be whatever data ref goes with flight control deflections. There is no limit to what data you can put in here. The more, the better, as far as I'm concerned. You can have one data ref, hell, you can actually have 0 data refs, or you can have 1,000 if you can come up with the data. By all means, put it in. And that's why I love this format so much. It's so flexible. You can put in any data column you want. All you got to do is find the data ref in X-Plane that you want to drive for each column. All right, so we got some comments, and now we have the actual lines of data. Now, here's the trick. For this version 4 file format, the first column must be the time. All right, in the first 7 7 things I'm about to show you actually do not have data refs associated with them because they must be in every line, because this is when and where the airplane is. So you got to have this. You don't even need data refs. You have to have the first 7 values, period. So the first one is the time. Notice the format. Get every character right. It is the Zulu 20:49:37 hours, minutes, and seconds. This is the Zulu time. This is the format it's got to be in. 2 digits, colon, 2 digits, colon, 2 digits, and then a comma. This is exactly what Garmin prints. So I was able to just copy and paste this column from the Garmin CSV right into my FDR. After that, degrees longitude, must be degrees longitude every time. Again, copied and pasted right out of Garmin CSV file. Degrees latitude, feet MSL, heading in degrees, that's magnetic, by the way, magnetic heading in degrees, degrees pitch, and degrees roll. So these first 7 values all were copied and pasted straight from the Garmin CSV file and must be the first 7 values of any X-Plane FDR file. You gotta know when and where you are and what your attitude is. Now that you've done these 7 columns, all the columns to follow are whatever columns you can come up with to add more detail. Maybe none, maybe 1,000, maybe somewhere in between. Here, it looks like in my Garmin file, I came up with about another 15 or 20 or so. So you'll notice the first one is barometric setting, inches HG pilot. And boom, there it is. Of course, you see the very next column. Barometric pressure, then a knots indicated airspeed, knots true airspeed, and knots ground speed. Look familiar? These columns are the exact same things we just came up with these data refs to, and so on and so forth until we've got all the columns of data that Garmin gives us, winding up finally with COM2 radio frequency. And what do you know, the last item on the list, COM2 frequency. And so the trick here, and it's really not even very much of a trick, is just to copy the columns in from the Garmin, make sure there's a comma between each column, make sure you exactly follow the time format of 2 digits, colon, 2 digits, colon, 2 digits, and that your next values are longitude, latitude, feet MSL, magnetic heading, pitch, and roll. And after that, all the columns you want, each one associated with the data ref, and of course the number of data refs you see here must be equal to the number of columns you see here. And of course in the same order, right? Because they're assumed to be in the same order. The first column better be barometric pressure setting inches pilot. The last one better be COM2 frequency. And that's really it. Once you've got this file saved and you know you've got your 7 critical data points for each moment in time copied and pasted from your Garmin, you know you have all the other columns you want, you know you got the data refs you want to drive each of them, and they should all be sim/cockpit2/something wherever possible. Looks like we made an exception for the fuel. But once you've gotten that, then all you got to do is quite simple. You just got to fire up X-Plane, and here we are. Then go to File menu and say Load Flight, and choose the FDR file that you just saved. And load that FDR file up you just saved. And if you did everything I just said, then here you go. You will be sitting in the cockpit of the desired airplane with the situation described by the FDR file. So we've got the time up here is kind of nice, and we will just hit play. And then as we hit play, we're actually going to see all those data refs coming into being. You can see I'm doing an engine start here. The gas generator RPM is coming up. The prop RPM is coming up. Getting some temperature, some torque. So this airplane is doing exactly what the real one did, because I just grabbed those columns of data from the Garmin FDR file, copied and pasted the columns right into X-Plane's FDR file, or from Garmin's CSV file, I guess I should say, and into X-Plane's FDR file. So here we go, and we're now going to replay the flight. Let me go ahead and go fast forward here. Now, of course, the airplane is jerking around a little bit because Garmin's GPS is not absolutely perfect. And of course, the replay can only show the data it's actually got. I can pretty much just see the YouTube comments now. You know, oh, the landing gear tires looked a little flat. No, you didn't retract the landing gear when you went flying. Well, duh. Garmin doesn't record landing gear deflection, for God's sake. And they also don't record landing gear deployment. And so, of course, we're not going to render data that Garmin doesn't capture. But if Garmin captures it, boy oh boy, can we display it. And the result, I think, is pretty dang awesome. So I hope as many people as possible give this a try because the results are pretty dang cool.